The sun hung low over the red rocks, painting shadows long as wagon trains across the desert floor. Sarah Whitman pulled her shawl tighter against the evening chill as she made her way down the narrow path toward Cedar Creek, the only reliable water source within 3 miles of the mission school. Her water bucket swung empty at her side, its metal handle creaking with each step. It had been 2 years since Thomas died in the copper mine collapse. 2 years of black mourning clothes and pitying glances from the good Christian women of Fort Defiance. 2 years of teaching Navajo children their letters while the town whispered about the impropriety of a widow living alone. At 32, Sarah had learned to move through the world like a shadow, keeping her eyes downcast and her opinions to herself. The path wound between towering cottonwoods and scraggly mesquite bushes, following the ancient tracks worn smooth by countless feet over countless years. Sarah knew she shouldn't be out this late. Reverend Crawford had made it clear that proper ladies didn't wander the wilderness after sunset, but the water barrels at the school were nearly empty, and tomorrow was washing day. As she rounded the final bend, the sound of splashing water made her pause. Cedar Creek usually ran quiet this time of year, barely more than a whisper over smooth stones. Sarah crept forward, her boots silent on the sandy soil, and peered through the screen of willow branches. A man stood waist-deep in the deepest pool of the creek, his back to her as he poured handfuls of water over his shoulders. The dying sunlight caught the droplets cascading down his bronze skin, turning them to liquid gold. His hair, black as crow feathers, hung wet and heavy past his shoulder blades. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She knew she should turn away. Every lesson of propriety, every sermon about modesty and virtue demanded it. But something held her frozen, perhaps the graceful arc of his movements, or the way he seemed to belong to the landscape as naturally as the red rocks and ancient waters. He was magnificent in his freedom, unashamed of his place in the world in a way Sarah had never been permitted to be. The man turned slightly, revealing the strong line of his profile and the intricate scars marking his chest, not the random wounds of battle, but deliberate patterns that spoke of ceremony and tradition. Sarah recognized them from the few times she'd glimpsed Navajo men at trading posts' warrior markings, earned through trials she couldn't begin to imagine. Her water bucket slipped from nerveless fingers, clanging against a rock. The warrior spun toward the sound with liquid speed, one hand reaching for something on the creek bank. A knife, Sarah realized with a spike of fear, for a heartbeat that stretched like pulled taffy. They stared at each other across the twilight distance. His eyes were dark as the deepest parts of the creek, holding neither surprise nor shame at his state of undress.
"I'm sorry,"
Sarah stammered, her face burning despite the cool air.
"I didn't mean to. I was just—"
"Getting water." His voice was deep, touched with an accent that softened the harsh English consonants. He made no move to cover himself or reach for his clothes. As was I. Sarah's hands fumbled for her fallen bucket, her fingers clumsy with embarrassment. "I'll go. Find another spot." "The creek belongs to no one." He tilted his head, studying her with the same frank curiosity she'd shown him moments before. "You are the woman who teaches our children their letters, the one who speaks to them as if they were real people." The observation startled her from her flustered state. "Of course they're real people. Why would anyone think otherwise?" A smile ghosted across his features. "You would be surprised. Sarah Whitman." Her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver through her. "You know who I am?" "My sister's daughter sits in your classroom. She speaks of the teacher with yellow hair who does not hit them when they speak Dain Bizad." He moved through the water with unconscious grace, reaching for his clothes on a flat rock. "I am called Ashki Nezah, in your tongue." He paused, pulling on his cotton pants with unhurried movements. "Tall boy, though I have not been a boy for many seasons." Sarah forced herself to look away as he dressed, though the image of him standing proud and natural in the water seemed burned into her eyelids. "Your niece, is she Little Crow Maria?" "Her name is Shimasani Yaji, but yes, you call her Maria." His voice carried a note of sadness. Soon they will cut her hair and forbid her true name entirely.
Not in my classroom,
Sarah said firmly, surprising herself with the vehemence. I won't be party to erasing who these children are. Ashki finished pulling on his shirt and stepped closer. Though he maintained a respectful distance, up close, she could see he was perhaps 5 years her senior, with laugh lines beginning to form at the corners of his eyes. You speak dangerous words. Sarah Whitman, the men in black coats would not approve. The men in black coats approve of very little, I do. She lifted her chin, finding courage in his steady gaze. A widow teaching school, living alone, speaking to Indians as equals. I'm already a scandal waiting to happen.
And yet you stay. Someone needs to.
She gestured toward the mission school, visible as a dark smudge against the mesa. If I can teach even one child to read and write well enough to defend themselves in this new world your people are being forced into. Our people, Ashki corrected gently. This land belongs to all who respect it, regardless of the color of their skin. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, like ice cracking on a frozen pond. How long since someone had spoken to her as an equal, without the careful distance reserved for widows and outsiders? I should fill my bucket. It's getting dark. The best water is upstream. He picked up her bucket before she could protest, leading the way along a path she hadn't noticed before, away from where the cattle cross. They walked in companionable silence, the creek chuckling alongside them. Sarah found herself stealing glances at his profile, at the way he moved through the gathering darkness with absolute certainty. Everything about him spoke of belonging to this place, to himself, to the ancient rhythms of the land. How long have you been watching the school? She asked as he knelt to fill her bucket from a clear, deep pool. Since my sister agreed to send her daughter there. He tested the water with his palm before plunging the bucket deep. I wanted to know what kind of people would teach our children to forget themselves. And what did you decide? He stood, offering her the full bucket. Their fingers brushed as she took it, sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. That perhaps not all white teachers are the same, though you are the first I've seen who looks at the children and sees tomorrow instead of yesterday. I don't understand. The others, they see savages to be tamed, heathens to be saved. You see minds to be opened, spirits to be nurtured. He stepped back, but his eyes held hers. It is unexpected. Sarah felt exposed under his gaze, as if he could see through her proper dress and widow's reserve to the woman underneath who yearned for something beyond the narrow confines of acceptable society. I should go. They'll wonder where I am. Will you come back? The question hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Sarah knew the safe answer, the proper answer, but looking at him standing there in the last light, comfortable in his skin in a way she'd never been allowed to be, she found herself speaking a different truth. The water barrels need filling every few days. His smile transformed his face from handsome to devastating. Then perhaps we will meet again. Sarah Whitman. When the water calls us both. She turned to go, then paused. You could call me Sarah, just Sarah. Sarah. He said it like a prayer, like water over stones. And I am simply Ashki to those who see me truly. The walk back to the mission seemed longer than usual, though her bucket was heavy with clear water. Sarah's mind replayed the encounter with each step, the sculptured lines of his body in the creek, the intelligence in his dark eyes, the way he'd spoken to her as neither widow nor white woman, but simply as herself. At the kitchen door, she met Reverend Crawford's disapproving stare. Sister Whitman, you were gone quite some time. The near pools were muddy, she lied smoothly, surprised by how easily the deception came. I had to walk upstream. His pale eyes narrowed behind wire spectacles. A woman alone in the wilderness invites speculation, sister, and speculation invites sin. I'll bear that in mind. Reverend? She moved past him toward the kitchen, but his hand on her arm stopped her. You've been too familiar with the Indian children, Sister Whitman. Teaching them to read is one thing, but I've heard reports of you speaking their heathen tongue, encouraging their savage ways." Sarah carefully set down the bucket before she gave in to the urge to throw it at his pinched face. "I speak a few words of their language so I can better teach them ours. Surely understanding aids in salvation. Understanding breeds sympathy, and sympathy breeds corruption." His grip tightened painfully. "Remember your place, sister. You exist here on the charity of the mission board. That charity can be withdrawn." "Of course, Reverend." She kept her voice meek, her eyes downcast, playing the role of proper widow as she'd learned to do. "I live only to serve." He released her arm with obvious reluctance. "See that you remember that, and no more solitary wanderings after dark. It's unseemly." That night, as Sarah lay in her narrow bed listening to the wind sigh around the mission walls, she couldn't stop thinking about the warrior in the creek. Ashki. The name rolled through her mind like water over stones. She thought of how he'd stood there, magnificent and unashamed, so utterly comfortable in his own skin. She thought of his eyes, dark and knowing, seeing her not as the widow Whitman, but simply as Sarah. Her hands pressed against her stomach where an unfamiliar warmth had taken residence. 2 years of careful propriety, of measured steps and downcast eyes. And one chance encounter had cracked her carefully constructed walls like spring floods through a dam. She was in trouble, deep, dangerous trouble. And for the first time in 2 years, Sarah Whitman smiled into the darkness. 3 days passed before Sarah found another excuse to visit the creek. The water barrels were barely half empty, but she'd accidentally on purpose knocked one over while sweeping the kitchen floor. Reverend Crawford had scolded her for clumsiness, but granted permission for an afternoon water run. The October sun cast sharp shadows through the cottonwoods as Sarah made her way down the familiar path. Her heart beat like a drum against her ribs, though she told herself she was being foolish. There was no guarantee he would be there, no reason to think their paths would cross again. But as she rounded the bend toward the upstream pools, she saw him sitting on a flat boulder, working on what looked like a horse bridle. He looked up at her approach, and that slow smile spread across his face like sunrise over the mesas. "The water calls you back soon. Sarah." "I spilled a barrel," she admitted, setting down her bucket, though perhaps not entirely by accident. His laugh was rich and warm. The spirits work in mysterious ways, sometimes through clumsy hands. Sarah found herself smiling back, shedding the careful mask she wore at the mission like an unwanted shawl. "What are you making?" "A new bridle for my horse. The old one broke chasing wild mustangs last week." He held up the intricate weaving of leather and horsehair. "Would you like to see?" She settled on a nearby rock, carefully arranging her skirts. The autumn air was crisp but pleasant, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. "It's beautiful. The pattern reminds me of the rugs I've seen at the trading post. My grandmother's design." His fingers moved with practiced skill, weaving the strands together. "She taught me that everything we make should carry beauty, even simple tools. Beauty is not separate from use. It makes the use more meaningful." "I've never thought of it that way." Sarah watched his hands work, mesmerized by their sure movements. "In my world, beauty is often seen as frivolous, especially for widows. Your world has strange ideas." He glanced at her black dress with curiosity. "To mourn is natural, but to wrap yourself in darkness forever, the spirit needs color to heal." "It's been 2 years," Sarah said softly. "By rights, I could wear gray now, but the Reverend says it would be unseemly, that I should remember my loss always." "Do you need black cloth to remember your husband?" The question was asked without judgment, but it struck deep. "No, I remember Thomas every day, his laugh, his dreams of striking copper and building us a fine house, the way he sang off-key while shaving." She surprised herself by chuckling. "Wearing black doesn't bring him back, it just reminds everyone else that I'm marked, set apart. In my culture, we mourn deeply, but not forever. The dead want us to live, not join them in the Shadowlands. He set aside the bridle and looked at her directly.
What color would you wear, if you could choose?
Blue, Sarah answered without hesitation.
Like the sky just before dawn, or yellow, like sunflowers.
She shook her head.
Listen to me, talking nonsense.
Speaking truth is not nonsense. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out something wrapped in soft leather. Here, a small rebellion. Sarah unwrapped it carefully, gasping at what lay inside. It was a hair ornament, a small comb decorated with turquoise and silver, delicate as butterfly wings.
I can't accept this, it's too fine.
It was my sister's, but she gifted it to me when she married. She said to give it to someone who needed to remember beauty. He gestured to her severely pinned hair.
Wear it where the black coat men cannot see, a secret color against all that darkness.
Sarah's fingers trembled as she touched the smooth stones.
Why are you being kind to me?
Why do you teach our children with patience instead of the switch? He shrugged. Kindness needs no reason. It simply is. She carefully tucked the comb into her pocket, feeling its weight like a talisman.
Tell me about your sister, the one with the daughter in my class.
Neol Ba, in English, Wind Woman. She married a silversmith from Black Mountain clan. They have 3 children, but only the eldest attends your school. The younger ones, she keeps hidden. Hidden from what? His face darkened. From those who would take them to the Eastern schools, where they cut hair and beat the language from children's mouths, where they teach them to be white and ashamed. Sarah had heard whispers of such schools, but dismissed them as exaggeration.
Surely it can't be that severe. They're children.
They took my cousin's son 3 winters ago. When he returned, he would not speak our language, would not eat our food. He sat in the corner of the hogan and wept for bacon and white bread. Ashki's voice was steady, but she could see the anger in the tight line of his shoulders. He forgot the prayers, forgot the stories, forgot his own name. Now he lives between worlds, welcome in neither.
That's monstrous!
The word escaped before Sarah could stop it. That is civilization, according to your people.
They're not my people,
Sarah said fiercely.
Not if they do such things.
He studied her for a long moment. You are unusual. Sarah Whitman. Most whites see only what they wish to see.
Maybe I'm tired of seeing what I'm supposed to see.
She stood, pacing to the creek's edge.
Do you know what my life is? Ashki, I wake before dawn, teach all day, retire after sunset.
I speak when spoken to, lower my eyes in the presence of men, pretend gratitude for the charity of my position. I am a shadow in widow's weeds, neither alive nor properly dead.
And yet you are here,
speaking to me,
accepting gifts.
His voice held gentle teasing. Perhaps the shadow is learning to step into the light. She turned to face him, something wild and desperate rising in her chest.
Teach me. Teach you what? Your language, properly. Not just the few words I've picked up.
She moved closer, urgent now.
If I can speak to the children in their own tongue, truly speak to them,
maybe I can help them hold on to something. Maybe I can be more than just another white teacher trying to erase them. The Reverend would not approve. The Reverend approves of nothing I do anyway. She lifted her chin.
Will you teach me?
Ashki rose, closing the distance between them until she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. This is dangerous ground you walk. Sarah, learning our language means learning our ways, our stories, our view of the world. It changes a person.
I want to be changed.
The words came out as barely a whisper.
I'm so tired of being what I'm supposed to be.
He reached out, his finger barely grazing a strand of hair that had escaped her severe bun. Then I will teach you, but not here, where anyone might see. There is a place upstream, past the 3 rocks that look like sleeping bears. Do you know it? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. His nearness was doing strange things to her composure. Meet me there tomorrow, When the sun touches the western cliffs, bring paper if you must, but the best learning comes from listening. He stepped back, breaking the spell.
Now fill your bucket before the black coats wonder why water takes so long to find.
As Sarah knelt by the pool, she was acutely aware of him watching her, not with the hungry gaze she remembered from men at socials before her marriage, but with something deeper: interest, respect, recognition of a kindred spirit trapped by circumstance.
There's something else,
she said as she stood with the full bucket. Reverend Crawford mentioned something about new regulations coming, about all Indian children being required to attend boarding schools.
Is that what you meant about taking them east?
His face went still as stone.
When? He didn't say exactly, but he seemed pleased about it, said it would solve the Indian problem once and for all.
She gripped the bucket handle tighter.
I thought you should know.
I suspected this was coming. He gathered his things with sharp, economical movements. I must warn my sister, and the others.
Ashki.
She wanted to say something comforting, but what comfort could she offer? She was part of the system trying to destroy his people, whether she willed it or not. He paused, reading her distress.
This is not your fault.
Sarah, you bring warning instead of silence. That is more than most would do. It's not enough.
No,
he agreed quietly. But it is a beginning. That evening at dinner, Sarah pushed food around her plate while Reverend Crawford droned on about the Lord's work among the heathens. The small weight of the turquoise comb in her pocket felt like rebellion itself. She found herself studying the other teachers, Miss Elmira Woodworth, pinched and proper, who rapped knuckles for speaking Navajo, Mr. Josiah Hensley, who reeked of whiskey and called the students little savages when he thought no one was listening. Sister Whitman, you seem distracted. Crawford's voice cut through her thoughts. My apologies. Reverend, I was considering tomorrow's lesson.
Ah, yes, your lessons.
His smile was thin as paper. I've noticed you've been teaching the older students poetry. Wordsworth. I believe... Yes, Reverend, I find they respond well to descriptions of nature. Miss Woodworth sniffed, filling their heads with fanciful notions. They need practical education, how to be proper servants and laborers. They need to learn to think, Sarah said before she could stop herself. They're children, not chattel. Silence fell over the table like a shroud. Mr. Hensley's fork clattered against his plate. Sister Whitman. Crawford's voice was dangerously soft. Need I remind you that these children are here by the grace of God and the generosity of the mission board? We are saving them from lives of ignorance and paganism. Of course, Reverend. Sarah lowered her eyes, playing the submissive widow once more. I spoke out of turn. See that you remember your place. He returned to his meal, but Sarah could feel his suspicious gaze returning to her throughout dinner. Later, in the privacy of her small room, Sarah pulled out the turquoise comb and held it up to the lamplight. The stones seemed to hold the color of the sky, of freedom, of water running over ancient rocks. She thought of Ashki's hands crafting the bridle, of his voice saying her name like a prayer, of the way he moved through the world as if he belonged in his own skin. Tomorrow she would meet him past the Sleeping Bear Rocks. Tomorrow she would begin to learn not just words, but a different way of seeing. Tomorrow she would take another step away from the shadow she'd become. Sarah carefully hid the comb beneath her mattress, then pulled out paper and pencil. If she was going to learn properly, she'd need to be organized about it. But as she tried to make neat columns for vocabulary, she found herself instead sketching the curve of a creek, the line of shoulders beneath wet hair, the shape of hands weaving beauty into everyday things. She was in trouble, deep, transformative trouble, and she couldn't wait for tomorrow to come. The place past the Sleeping Bear Rocks was a hidden grove where ancient cottonwoods formed a natural cathedral. Sarah arrived as the sun painted the western cliffs gold, her heart hammering beneath her prim bodice. She'd told Reverend Crawford she needed to gather medicinal herbs, not entirely a lie. As she'd learned, some of the children responded better to traditional remedies than the mission's harsh tonics. Ashki emerged from the shadows between the trees like he'd grown from the earth itself. Today he wore a white cotton shirt and dark trousers, his hair bound back with a strip of red cloth. The sight of him still stole her breath. "You came," he said simply. "Did you doubt I would?" "A little." His smile was self-deprecating. "Sometimes the daylight makes night promises fade." "Not this one." Sarah set down her basket, pulling out the paper and pencils she'd brought. "Though I warn you, I was a terrible student of French at the academy. My accent made Madame Beaumont weep." "This will be different." He gestured for her to sit on a flat stone, worn smooth by centuries of flood and drought. "Dana Bizad is not learned from books. It lives in the breath, the land, the connections between all things." "How do we begin?" Instead of answering directly, he pointed to the creek. "What do you see?" "Water running over rocks." "In English, yes, but we see to not just water, but life flowing, time passing, the blood of the earth." He knelt beside the stream, cupping liquid in his palm. "Every word carries the world within it. To speak our language is to speak with the voice of the land itself." For the next hour, he led her through basics, not just vocabulary, but concepts. How directions weren't mere compass points, but sacred orientations. How verbs changed based on the shape and nature of objects. How the language itself encoded a way of being that valued harmony and relationship over dominion. "Your tongue wants to make everything possess or be possessed," he explained as Sarah struggled with a particularly complex verb form. "In Dana Bizad, we speak of being with, not owning." "Like marriage," Sarah said without thinking, then blushed at the comparison. "Yes and no." His eyes found hers across the gathering dusk. "Your marriage makes woman belong to man. Ours makes two people belong with each other. To the family, to the clan, to the land. No ownership, only connection." Sarah felt something shift in her chest, like tectonic plates realigning. "Thomas wasn't like that. He saw me as a partner, an equal. It's one reason we scandalized his family." "Tell me about him." The invitation was gentle, without jealousy or judgment. Sarah found herself speaking more freely than she had in 2 years, about Thomas's dreams and failures, his tenderness and frustration, the way he died still believing the next shaft would yield fortune. "He was a good man, but sometimes I wonder if I mourned him or the life we were supposed to have, the children that never came, the house that never got built. Both can be true." Ashki moved to sit beside her, close enough that she could smell sage and wood smoke on his clothes. "We can mourn what was and what might have been, but staying in that mourning," he shook his head, "that is choosing death over life." "Is that why you're not married, choosing life?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. His laugh was rueful. "I was married. She died bringing our son into the world. He lived 3 days. The words were said simply, but she could hear the old pain beneath them. For a year, I was like you, wrapped in darkness, walking between worlds. Then my grandmother told me something." "What?" "That the dead do not need our grief. They need our lives lived fully. So when we join them, we have stories to share." He picked up a smooth stone, turning it in his fingers. "So I returned to the living, but finding someone who could see past what I had lost, that has been difficult. Until now." Sarah hardly dared breathe the question. "Until now." He handed her the stone, warm from his hand, smooth as silk. "Keep this. When the words tangle your tongue, hold it. Remember that language lives in touch as much as sound." Their lessons continued as stars began to pierce the darkening sky. Sarah learned that his full name, Ashki Nezah, meant more than tall boy. It carried implications of growth, of reaching toward sky, of standing between earth and heaven. She learned that her name, Sarah, sounded like the wind through grass when he said it with the proper Navajo inflection. I should go, she said reluctantly as full dark approached.
If I'm late again.
Wait. He produced something from his pack, a small leather pouch on a cord. Wear this under your dress. It contains herbs for clear thinking and protection.
Protection from what?
From those who would make you small. His fingers brushed her throat as he tied the cord around her neck, the touch sending fire across her skin.
You are learning to be large. Sarah, some will not like that.
The next weeks fell into a pattern. Twice, sometimes 3 times a week. Sarah would find reasons to be near the creek at sunset. Each meeting deepened both her understanding of the language and her connection to the man teaching it. They shared stories, silences, and slowly, carefully, the touches that said more than words. She learned that he'd fought in the resistance against Kit Carson, had survived the long walk that killed so many of his people. He learned that she'd defied her parents to marry Thomas, had worked as a seamstress to support them both when the mine investments failed. They discovered a shared love of desert mornings, a mutual distrust of authority, and the ability to make each other laugh even when discussing painful things. One evening in late November, Sarah arrived at their meeting place to find Ashki teaching his niece to fish. Little crow Shimasani Yaji looked up with bright eyes. Miss Sarah, uncle is showing me the old way to catch fish, with just hands and patience. Your uncle is a good teacher, Sarah said in careful Navajo, making the girl gasp with delight. You speak real words, not the baby talk, mister. Hensley uses... Ashki's eyes crinkled with amusement. Show Miss Sarah what you've learned. Little one, I need to check my snares. As he melted into the trees, Sarah knelt beside the girl at the creek's edge.
You know, in my classroom.
You can always use your real name if you want.
Really? The child's face lit up. But Reverend Crawford says our names are heathen, that God can't hear prayers in Navajo.
That's nonsense. Sarah's voice came out fiercer than intended. If God made everything, then he made your language too. How could he not understand it? The girl considered this with a seriousness only children could muster. You're different from the other teachers. Is that good or bad?
Good. You see us.
She paused, then added in a whisper,
Uncle thinks so too. He smiles more since you started coming to the creek.
Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks.
Does he?
Grandmother says he's been walking in shadows but maybe found sunlight again. The girl suddenly thrust her hands into the water, coming up empty but laughing. Missed Uncle makes it look easy.
Most worthwhile things aren't easy,
Sarah said, thinking of more than fishing. When Ashki returned with 2 rabbits for his family's dinner, he found them both elbow-deep in creek water, soaking wet and giggling like conspirators. Something in his expression made Sarah's heart skip. I should take you home, little one, he told his niece. Your mother will wonder. As they prepared to leave, the girl threw her arms around Sarah's waist.
Thank you for seeing us, Miss Sarah.
Over the child's head, Sarah met Ashki's eyes. The look there, tender, wanting, impossibly complicated, made her knees weak. Same time tomorrow, he asked quietly. Yes, always yes, no matter the risk. But risk had a way of finding them. The next afternoon, Sarah was called to Reverend Crawford's office. He sat behind his massive desk like a spider in its web. Pale fingers steepled. Sister Whitman, it has come to my attention that you've been seen frequently at the creek, alone, gathering herbs and water, as I've explained, and yet you return with very little of either. His smile was sharp as glass. You've also been observed speaking enthusiastically with the Indian children, in their own tongue. Sarah kept her face carefully neutral. I find a few words of their language helps with instruction, as I've said before. Yes, you've said many things. He opened a drawer, pulling out a familiar object that made Sarah's blood freeze, her sketch pad, the one she thought safely hidden beneath her mattress. Imagine my surprise when Mrs. Elmira, concerned for your spiritual welfare, discovered these during cleaning. He spread the pages across his desk. Her drawings of Ashki, pages of Navajo words, pressed flowers from their meeting place. And worst of all, a half-finished letter she'd been writing to herself, trying to understand the feelings threatening to consume her. "I can explain." "No need." His voice was soft, deadly. "It's quite clear. You formed an unwholesome attachment to one of the savages, a widow, forgetting her place, her race, her God. It's not what you think. He's teaching me the language so I can better reach the children." Silence. The word cracked like a whip. "You have two choices. Sister Whitman, end this association immediately and submit to proper guidance, including daily prayer sessions with myself and Mrs. Elmira, or find yourself without position, without home, without references. I wonder how far a disgraced widow would get in this territory." Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. She thought of the children who needed her, of little Shimasani Yaji saying, "You see us," thought of Ashki's eyes, the warmth of his hands, the world he was showing her beyond the narrow confines of proper society. "I understand. Reverend?" The words tasted like ashes. "I will comply with your guidance." "Excellent. You will burn these aberrations immediately, and you will have no further contact with the Indians beyond what your teaching duties require. Is that clear?" "Yes, Reverend." But as Sarah watched her drawings curl and blacken in the mission stove that night, she pressed the hidden stone in her pocket and made a different vow. She would be careful. She would play their game. But she would not give up the light she'd found in the shadows by the creek. The dead needed their stories, but the living needed their courage. And Sarah was finally, fully, choosing to live. The first snow came early that year, dusting the red rocks like sugar on dried blood. Sarah hadn't been to the creek in 2 weeks, not since Crawford's ultimatum. She moved through her days like an automaton, teaching, praying, enduring misses. Elmira's sanctimonious lectures about the dangers of allowing sentiment to overcome sense. But the children noticed. Little Crow. She'd stopped responding to Shimasani Yazi since Sarah could no longer use it. Grew quiet and withdrawn. The other students whispered among themselves, sensing the change like young animals scenting a predator. "Miss Sarah looks like a ghost," she overheard one boy tell another, "like the spirits ate her colors." If only they knew how right they were. The breaking point came on a bitter December evening. Sarah was locking the schoolhouse when she noticed fresh bruises on the arms of Samuel Yazi, one of her older students. The boy, 13 and proud, tried to hide them beneath his sleeves. "Who did this?" she asked quietly, though she suspected the answer. "It's nothing, Miss Sarah." "Samuel." He looked away. "Mr. Hensley said I was speaking devil words, but I was only singing my grandfather's planting song. Very quiet, to remember." Rage, white-hot and purifying, flooded through Sarah's carefully controlled exterior. "He had no right." "It's what they do." The boy's voice was flat, aged beyond his years. "Uncle says it will get worse, that they're coming to take us all away soon, to the schools where they cut your hair and beat you for dreaming and dying." Sarah knelt before him, abandoning all pretense of proper distance. "Samuel, listen to me. Your songs, your words, your dreams, they're not devil's work. They're who you are, and anyone who tries to beat that out of you is the real evil. But what can we do? We're just Indians. You're just a woman." "Watch your tongue, boy." The new voice made them both jump. Ashki stood in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders like war paint. "This woman has more courage than most men I know." "Uncle," Samuel straightened. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." His eyes found Sarah's, and the naked longing there stole her breath. 2 weeks of separation seemed to stretch between them like a lifetime. "Take my horse. Tell your mother I'll walk back." After the boy left, they stood frozen, drinking in the sight of each other. Sarah broke first. "You shouldn't be here. Crawford has spies everywhere."
Crawford is in town, meeting with the federal agents about the new school mandates. He stepped closer, and she could see new lines of strain around his eyes. Sarah, we need to talk. We can't. I gave my word.
Your word to stay away from me, or your word to let children be beaten for their heritage? The accusation stung because it was true. What would you have me do if I lose this position? Who will protect them, at least with me here?
You suffer in silence while nothing changes. His voice was gentle but unrelenting. The Sarah I knew by the creek would not accept this. That Sarah was a fool, she said bitterly, living in dreams while the real world prepared its chains.
No. He closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. That Sarah was awake. This one sleeps in fear.
His touch undid her. 2 weeks of careful control, of measured breaths and downcast eyes, shattered like ice in spring flood. She pressed her face against his palm, tears she'd refused to shed burning her eyes. I'm so tired, Ashki, tired of pretending, of being small, of watching them hurt the children and doing nothing.
Then stop. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Come with me. Now. Tonight. Where?
There's a gathering. The clans are meeting to discuss resistance to the school mandates. They need someone who understands both worlds, who can help prepare the children for what's coming. His eyes searched hers. They need you. Sarah's proper objections died unspoken. What was propriety against children's bruises? What was her comfortable prison against the chance to truly help? Crawford will destroy my reputation. I'll never teach again. You'll teach, just not in their schools. A smile ghosted across his face. Unless you prefer prayer meetings with Mrs. Elmira to winter nights by the fire, learning the old stories. Despite everything, Sarah laughed, when you put it that way. Get what you need. We leave within the hour. Sarah ran back to her room, heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. She packed quickly her few personal belongings, the hidden turquoise comb, the medicine pouch he'd given her, as an afterthought. She grabbed her teaching supplies. Crawford could call her what he liked, but she wouldn't abandon her true calling. She left a note on her desk. The children deserve better than bruises and erasure. I go to give them what you cannot, respect for who they are. S. Whitman. The ride through falling snow felt like crossing between worlds. Sarah sat before Ashki on his paint horse, his arms around her for warmth and balance. Each mile from the mission felt like shedding skin, becoming new. Are you afraid? He asked against her ear. Terrified. She leaned back against his solid warmth. And more alive than I've been in years. His laugh rumbled through her. Fear and aliveness often walk together. It's how we know we're on the right path. The gathering was in a hidden canyon where ancient ruins provided shelter from wind and watching eyes. Dozens of families had come. Navajo, Apache, even some Hopi and Pueblo peoples united in their determination to protect their children. Sarah expected suspicion, rejection. Instead, she found cautious welcome. This is the teacher who speaks true words, Ashki announced, who sees our children as human, who chose standing with us over comfort with them. An elderly woman studied Sarah with eyes like obsidian chips. You gave up much, white woman. Why? Sarah met her gaze steadily. Because bruises on a child's arm weigh more than any reputation. Because songs in Dine are prayers, not devil's work. Because... She glanced at Ashki, then back to the elder. Because I would rather fail trying to do right than succeed in doing wrong. The woman nodded slowly. Then you are welcome at our fire. But know this, the path you choose has no returning. I understand. But she didn't. Not fully. Until later that night. The formal discussions had ended. Plans set in motion to hide children, to resist with law and cunning rather than the violence that would bring massacre. Families settled around individual fires, and Sarah found herself alone with Ashki in the shelter of a ruined wall.
You did well, he said, offering her a blanket. Grandmother Whiteshell approved of you. That rarely happens with outsiders. I'm still an outsider. The truth of it ached. I always will be. Won't I, neither white nor Indian, trusted fully by none. Is that what you think? He pulled her against him, her back to his chest, wrapping the blanket around them both. That you're alone between worlds. Aren't I? No. His breath warmed her neck. You're building a bridge, and bridges touch both shores while belonging fully to neither. That's not weakness, it's sacred work. Sarah turned in his arms, studying his face in the firelight. Is that how you see me, as sacred work? I see you as Sarah. His hand cupped her face. Brave, foolish, beautiful Sarah who gave up everything to stand in truth. How could I not? He didn't finish, but his eyes said what words couldn't. The space between them crackled with possibility and danger, with a need held in check by propriety that seemed suddenly, utterly irrelevant. Ashki, she breathed, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was nothing like the chaste pecks she'd shared with Thomas in their courtship. This was fire and demand, tenderness and claim, two souls recognizing their match across impossible odds. Sarah's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, propriety burning away like morning mist. When they broke apart, breathing hard, his eyes were dark with want. Sarah, there's no undoing this. I know. She traced his jaw, marveling at her boldness. But I'm tired of undoing myself for others' comfort, aren't you? His answer was another kiss, deeper, longer, full of promises that needed no words. And when he laid her down on the blanket beneath the ancient stars, when skin met skin in reverent exploration, Sarah understood what he'd meant about bridges. She was crossing one now, leaving the shore of who she'd been for the uncertain but brilliant country of who she might become. They made love like a prayer, like defiance, like coming home. His hands and mouth worshipped her body while she discovered the scars that mapped his history. Here, the bullet wound from Carson's soldiers. There, the ritual marks of his warrior training. Everywhere, the evidence of a life lived fully despite loss. I love you, she gasped against his throat, surprising herself with the truth of it. God help me, I love you. And I love you, Nitsaikis. His voice broke on the endearment. My unexpected gift, my bridge between worlds. After, they lay entwined beneath the blanket while snow fell like benediction on the ancient stones. Sarah traced the patterns of his scars while he told her what each one meant, weaving their separate histories into shared story. No regrets, he asked as dawn approached. None. She pressed closer to his warmth. Whatever comes, this was worth it. You are worth it. Even if Crawford brands you fallen, even if your own people call you squaw? The ugly word made her flinch, but she met his worried gaze steadily. Let them call me what they like. I know who I am now. She smiled, fierce and free. I'm the woman who loves you, the teacher who'll help these children keep their souls, the bridge between worlds. That's enough, more than enough. He kissed her again, soft and deep, a seal on the promise of the new life they were building from the ashes of the old. And as the sun rose over the snow-touched canyon, painting the world in shades of possibility, Sarah knew she'd finally found her true self in the last place anyone would think to look, in the arms of a Navajo warrior who taught her that love was the greatest rebellion of all. Word of Sarah's abandonment of the mission spread like wildfire through the territory. Within days, riders brought news that made her blood run cold. Reverend Crawford had branded her a fallen woman corrupted by savage influence and warned all Christian establishments against harboring her. Worse, he'd accelerated his cooperation with the federal agents, providing lists of every Indian child in the region. They're moving faster than we expected, Ashki reported after meeting with other clan leaders. The federal marshals will arrive within the month. Sarah paced the earthen floor of the hogan where they'd taken shelter with his sister's family. We need to get the children away. Hide them. Where?
Wind Woman asked, her voice heavy with despair. They know our camps, our relatives. They have maps, guides who betrayed us for silver. Then we go where they don't expect. Sarah's mind raced. Not to traditional camps, but to the Mexican settlement south, to the mining towns where questions aren't asked if you have coin. With what money? Another woman challenged. We have no gold for bribes. Sarah touched the locket at her throat. Thomas's last gift, the only valuable thing she owned. We have enough to start, and I can teach. So, take in washing. Others have skills to trade. We just need to break the trail, make them impossible to track. The room erupted in debate. Some called her plan foolish, others desperate enough to try anything. Through it all, Ashki watched her with something like wonder. You would do this, Wind Woman finally asked. Risk everything for children not your own. They are my own. Sarah's voice carried fierce conviction. Every child I taught, every soul I watched dimmed by Crawford's cruelty. They're mine to protect now. The preparations began immediately. Sarah wrote letters to sympathetic contacts in the territory, a Jewish merchant who'd always treated the Indians fairly, a Mexican rancher who'd married an Apache woman, even a few former students from the East who'd written of their horror at the boarding school conditions. Not all would help, but some might. Meanwhile, Ashki organized the physical evacuation. Families would leave in small groups, taking different routes to avoid detection. The elderly and those too sick to travel would create decoy camps, leading pursuers away from the children. It's not enough, Sarah said one evening, exhausted from teaching children escape phrases in Spanish and English. Crawford knows I'm involved now. He'll use that, claim I'm corrupting them with white woman's wickedness. We need something more, something that turns his weapon against him. What do you mean? The law? Crawford hides behind it, but law cuts both ways. She pulled out paper and began writing furiously. There are people in Washington who oppose the boarding schools, reformers, journalists, even some churchmen, if we can get evidence to them. Evidence of what everyone knows: children are beaten in those schools. No one with power cares. But they might care if white children were being beaten. Sarah's smile was sharp as broken glass. Or if federal funds meant for Indian education were lining Crawford's pockets instead. Ashki stared at her. You know something. I kept the mission's books for 2 years. I know exactly how much flour and beef was supposed to feed the children versus how much actually arrived. I know which suppliers kicked back to Crawford, which inspectors looked the other way. She met his eyes. I was too afraid to use it before. I'm not afraid now. This is dangerous. Sarah, Crawford has powerful friends. So do I, or I did, before I became a scandal. She touched his face gently. My cousin Charlotte married a newspaper editor in Denver. My aunt knows senators' wives. The very connections Crawford thinks I've lost might be our salvation, if I can make them see past the scandal to the truth. The next days blurred together. By night, Sarah helped families pack and plan. By day, she wrote letters, affidavits, careful documentation of everything she'd witnessed at the mission. Ashki's grandmother taught her to make traditional foods for the journey, while his sister helped her modify her Eastern dresses for desert travel. You're different now, Wind Woman observed, watching Sarah grind corn with increasingly competent hands. Not trying to be Indian, but not trying to be white either. Just yourself. It only took losing everything to find that, Sarah replied wryly. Sometimes that's what it takes. A week before the marshals were due, their scouts reported movement. Crawford himself was riding with a federal judge and several territorial officials, making speeches about the dangerous influence of degraded whites on the Indian population. He's coming for you specifically, Ashki said after hearing the report, using you as an example of what happens when races mix. Good. Sarah's voice was steady despite her racing heart. Let him come. Every moment he spends hunting me is a moment he's not stealing children. But they both knew it was more than that. The personal vendetta in Crawford's actions spoke of deeper fury,
A man who desired control over more than just Sarah's actions. Her escape with Ashki had wounded more than his authority. It had struck at his twisted sense of possession. The first families left that night, slipping away like smoke. Sarah kissed each child goodbye, pressing small gifts into their hands. A pencil to remember their lessons, a thread from her shawl for protection, words in 3 languages to help them survive. "You'll find us again," little Shimasani Yaji asked, clinging to Sarah's skirts. "Always," Sarah promised. "No matter how far you go, I'll find you. And until then—" She knelt, meeting the girl's eyes. "You remember who you are? Your real name, your real words, your real heart. They can take everything else, but they can't take that unless you let them." The child nodded solemnly, then surprised Sarah by singing a soft blessing in Dane 1 Ashki's grandmother had taught her. "For the bridge woman," she said, "so both sides stay strong." By dawn, half the children were gone, but with them went Sarah's carefully written testimonies, sewn into clothing and hidden in supply packs, seeds of truth scattered on the wind, seeking fertile ground. "My turn soon," Sarah said as she and Ashki watched the sunrise from their favorite overlook. "I need to go east, to Denver at least, make sure the letters reach the right hands, stir up enough trouble that they can't simply sweep this under the rug." "Then I go with you." "No." She turned to face him. "You're needed here, to protect those who can't run, and being seen with me will only make things worse for your people. Crawford's already painting me as a corrupting influence. If they see us together—" "I don't care what they see." "But I do. I care about keeping you alive, keeping you free." She gripped his hands. "This isn't goodbye. Ashki, this is strategy. We fight on different fronts for a while, then reunite when the battle's won. And if it's not won, then we keep fighting, from Mexico, from Canada, from wherever we have to go." She managed a smile. "You taught me that bridges touch both shores. Well, I need to work the eastern shore for a while, but I'll come back, I swear it." He pulled her close, and she breathed him in, sage and smoke, desert wind and home. "How long?" "Spring. By the time the snow melts, I'll have raised enough noise that they'll have to investigate Crawford, maybe even shut down the forced removals, at least temporarily." She pulled back to look at him. "Can you keep them safe until spring? Can you stay alive in the white world that long? They won't be kind to a fallen woman who chose an Indian over them." "They never were kind to begin with. At least now I'm fallen for something worthwhile." Their last night together burned with desperate intensity. They made love like warriors before battle, memorizing each other's skin against the separation to come. Sarah traced words in dine across his chest, promises, blessings, love songs she'd only just learned to speak. He responded in kind, writing his devotion on her body in touches that transcended language. "Nitsi kis," he whispered against her hair as dawn approached. "My thought, my mind, my unexpected gift. Come back to me." "Always," she promised. "In this life or the next, I will always find my way back to you." When the morning came, Sarah looked every inch the proper Eastern lady, if one ignored the steel in her spine and the fire in her eyes. She'd hidden her treasures carefully, the turquoise comb in her hair, the medicine pouch beneath her corset, her heart wrapped in armor of necessity. "The stage leaves from Fort Defiance at noon," Ashki said as he helped her mount the horse that would take her to town. "Crawford will have men watching. Let them watch. Let them see Sarah Whitman returning to civilization." Her smile was sharp. "They have no idea what I'm bringing with me." He caught her hand one last time. "Fight well, warrior woman. Guard our children, warrior man." And with that, Sarah turned her horse east, riding toward a battle no one expected a fallen woman to win. Behind her, Ashki watched until she disappeared into the morning light. Ahead of her, Reverend Crawford waited with his chains and righteousness. never suspecting that the woman he'd tried to break had become the weapon that would destroy him. The real war for the children's souls had only just begun. The desert in winter could kill as surely as any bullet. Sarah learned this truth in the first days of their flight south, when the federal marshals found their initial hiding place and forced them to flee deeper into the wilderness. "Keep moving," Ashki urged as they struggled through a sandstorm that turned the world into a howling wall of red. Sarah pulled her shawl tighter around little Shimasani Yazi, who clung to her back. They'd been unable to reach the staging point where the child's family waited, and now she was their responsibility. Behind them, maybe a day, maybe less. Crawford's men followed with Indian trackers bought with whiskey and threats. The main group of families had scattered as planned, but Sarah, Ashki, and a handful of others had been cut off when the marshals arrived early. "There," Wind Woman pointed through the swirling dust. "The old shelter caves." They stumbled into the relative protection of a shallow cave system, humans and horses alike gasping for breath. Sarah's Eastern clothes, so carefully maintained for her planned return to Denver, were now tattered and dust-caked. Blood seeped through her boots where the desert had claimed its price. "Let me see," Ashki said, kneeling to examine her feet. "It's nothing," Sarah protested, though she could barely stand. "You white women and your pride." But his touch was infinitely gentle as he cleaned and wrapped her wounds with torn strips from his shirt. The desert doesn't care about stubborn. It only respects those who acknowledge its power. That night, huddled together for warmth while the storm raged outside, they took stock of their situation. 7 adults, 5 children, limited water, even less food. The horses were exhausted, and Crawford's men would pick up their trail once the storm passed. "We could make for Agua Prieta," suggested Jose, a Mexican trader who'd thrown in his lot with them. "My cousin runs horses there. He'd hide us." "Too far," Wind Woman said. "The little ones won't make it across the salt flats, not without more water." Sarah studied the cave walls, where ancient peoples had left their marks. Spirals and figures danced in the firelight, telling stories of other journeys, other survivals. "What about the old trading paths, the ones from before the borders?" Ashki's eyes lit with understanding. "The ghost roads, yes, but they're dangerous. Sacred sites that shouldn't be disturbed." "More dangerous than Crawford's rope?" Sarah asked bluntly. They decided to risk it. At dawn, they left the caves and turned west instead of south, following paths that existed more in memory than reality. Ashki and his sister led reading signs in bent grass and stone patterns that meant nothing to Sarah's eyes. The second day, their water ran low. The third, it ran out. Sarah gave her last mouthful to little Shimasani Yaji, ignoring Ashki's frustrated look. "Don't," she rasped through cracked lips. "I've survived worse." "When?" "Every day I pretended to be what they wanted." She managed a dry laugh. "At least this thirst is honest." That night, they found the first of the Ghost Well's ancient cisterns hidden in the rock, marked only by symbols Ashki's grandmother had made him memorize as a child. The water was brackish but drinkable. Life itself poured into their parched throats. "The ancestors provide," Wind Woman murmured, pouring a small offering onto the ground. "Ancestors and stubbornness," Jose added, watching Sarah coax the exhausted children to drink slowly despite their desperate thirst. They were refilling their water bags when they heard it. Horses, moving fast, coming from the east. Crawford's scouts had found them. "Into the rocks," Ashki commanded. "Women and children first." But Sarah grabbed his arm. "No, they want me most of all. I'll lead them away while you—" "Together or not at all," he said fiercely. "I didn't save you from Crawford's hell to lose you to his guns." There was no time to argue. They scattered into the maze of standing stones that surrounded the ghost well, parents carrying children, everyone moving with desperate silence. Sarah found herself pressed against Ashki in a narrow crevice, Shimasani Yazi trembling between them. The riders came into view, 6 men, hard-faced and dust-covered. Sarah recognized two from the mission, including Jacob Hensley, the teacher who'd bruised Samuel's arms. They circled the well, reading signs. They were here, one called. Water still disturbed. Can't have gone far, Hensley replied. He dismounted, rifle ready. That white whore and her savage can't hide forever. Crawford wants her alive, but accidents happen in the desert. Sarah felt Ashki tense, his hand moving to his knife. She pressed her palm against his chest. A silent plea. Not yet, not with the children so close. Check the stones, the lead tracker ordered. They're here somewhere. The men spread out, methodical and patient. Sarah's heart hammered so loud she was sure they'd hear it. Little Shimasani Yazi pressed her face into Sarah's shoulder, body shaking with suppressed sobs. Then, salvation from an unexpected source. A mountain lion's scream split the air. So close the horses reared in panic. The cat appeared on the rocks above them, magnificent and terrible in the dying light, tail lashing as it surveyed the intruders in its territory. Get mounted, the leader shouted as the lion gathered itself to spring. The men scrambled for their horses, firing wild shots that only enraged the cat further. It leaped, catching one rider's shoulder and sending him crashing to the ground. In the chaos that followed, the search party fled, dragging their mauled companion and leaving pink blood spattered on the stones. The lion watched them go, then turned its golden gaze to where Sarah and the others hid. For a breathless moment, predator and prey regarded each other. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the cat melted back into the gathering darkness. The spirits sent a protector, Wind Woman whispered in awe. Or the lion didn't like strangers at its water, Jose said practically, but even he looked shaken by the close call. They waited until full dark before emerging, then traveled through the night, putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. By dawn, they'd reached a series of box canyons where they could defend themselves if cornered. We can't keep running like this, Sarah said as they made camp in a hidden grotto. The children are exhausted. We all are. What choice do we have? Wind Woman asked. Crawford won't stop. Not now that you've made him look foolish. Sarah looked at the families huddled around their small fire parents holding children, everyone gaunt with hunger and fear. She thought of the documents she'd meant to carry east, the testimony that might have changed things through proper channels. That opportunity was gone now, but perhaps. We make our stand, she said suddenly, not with guns, but with witnesses. What witnesses? Ashki asked. We're alone out here. No, we're not. Sarah pulled out the small journal she'd kept throughout their flight, pages covered with careful documentation. There are settlements near here, Mexican villages, mining camps, even a cavalry outpost. Crawford is operating outside the law now, hunting us like animals. If we can reach witnesses, tell our story. They won't believe Indians, Jose said gently, or fallen women. Maybe not, but they might believe children. Sarah looked at each young face around the fire. Children who can speak 3 languages, read and write, tell their own stories of why they're running. Crawford says we're corrupting them, and let the world see what we're really doing, saving them. It was desperate, probably foolish, but it was better than dying in the desert or watching the children captured for schools that would destroy their souls. They spent the next day preparing, cleaning up as best they could, practicing the words the children would say to any authorities they met. On the second dawn, as they prepared to move toward the nearest settlement, riders appeared again, but this time from the south. Sarah's heart sank until she recognized the lead figure, Charlotte's husband, Robert McKenna, the Denver newspaper editor. Sarah, he dismounted, crushing her in an embrace that ignored all propriety. Charlotte's been beside herself when your letters arrived. Then news of Crawford's manhunt. He pulled back, taking in her ragged state. Good God, what has he done to you? Shown his true nature, Sarah replied. Robert, these children are under my paper's protection now. he said firmly. He gestured to his companions, 2 other journalists, a lawyer, and, surprisingly, a federal judge. Judge Morrison was very interested in your documentation of mission fund misappropriation. Seems Crawford has been stealing from more than just the Indian children. Sarah nearly collapsed with relief. Behind her, Ashki stood protective and wary, unused to white men who brought help instead of harm. "Sir," Sarah said carefully, "this is Ashki Nezah. He and his family saved my life. They've been protecting the children Crawford would kidnap." Robert extended his hand to Ashki, man to man. "Then I'm in your debt. Sir, any friend of Sarah's has my respect." The judge cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitman, I'll need your full testimony." And he looked uncomfortable. "Crawford has made certain accusations about your circumstances." Sarah lifted her chin. "I'm sure he has. I abandoned my position to protect children from cultural destruction and physical abuse. I've been traveling with Indian families who showed me more Christianity than Crawford ever possessed. If that makes me fallen, then I fall proudly." "And this man," the judge indicated Ashki, "Crawford claims you've been, that is—" "I love him," Sarah said simply. "I won't apologize for that, but my feelings don't negate the crimes I witnessed or the danger these children face." What followed was a week of careful negotiation. The journalists interviewed everyone, documenting stories that would soon scandalize readers across the territory. The judge took depositions, and slowly, carefully, the truth began to emerge. Not just about Crawford's cruelty, but about the entire system designed to erase indigenous children. "It's not enough to stop it all," Robert warned Sarah privately. "But it's enough to stop Crawford, maybe delay the worst of the mandates. And the children, these specific children, the judge is willing to place them under territorial protection pending investigation. They'll go home. Sarah, for now." For now, it wasn't perfect, but it was more than she'd dared hope when they'd fled into the desert. The night before they would part, the families returning north. Sarah heading to Denver to continue the legal fight. She and Ashki walked away from camp to their own private farewell. "You did it," he said, pulling her close under the vast star field. "Found a way to fight with paper instead of bullets." "We did it," she corrected. "I couldn't have survived without you, couldn't have found the courage to truly fight." "So what happens now? You go back to their world, become respectable again." Sarah laughed, the sound carrying across the desert like music. "I'll never be respectable again, but I might be useful. There are lawyers willing to challenge the school mandates, newspapers willing to tell the truth. The fight's not over." "And us," she turned in his arms, memorizing his face in the moonlight. "I meant what I said to the judge. I love you. That won't change whether I'm in Denver or the desert, but right now, your people need you here, and I can do the most good there." "Still building bridges," he murmured, understanding and sadness mingling in his voice. "Still building bridges," she agreed. "But every bridge needs strong foundations on both sides. We'll make this work. Ashki, somehow." They made love under the stars one last time, bodies speaking vows words couldn't capture. And when morning came, Sarah rode north with the journalists, looking back only once to see Ashki watching from the ridge. Guardian and beloved, temporary goodbye and eternal promise all at once. The desert had tried to kill them. Crawford had tried to destroy them, but they'd survived. Saved the children for now, and planted seeds of change that might, just might, grow into something powerful. The bridge held, battered and bloodied, but still standing, still connecting 2 worlds that desperately needed each other, whether they knew it or not. Spring came late to the border country that year, but when it arrived, it brought Sarah back to the desert. She rode into the mixed settlement of Dos Rios on a mud-splattered stage, her appearance drawing curious stares from the townsfolk. Gone was the proper Eastern lady. In her place sat a woman in practical split skirts and a wide-brimmed hat, her face tanned by sun and marked by purpose. "Mrs. Whitman," a familiar voice called out. Jose emerged from the general store, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. "We heard you were coming. Ashkey's been watching the northern road for 3 days. Sarah's heart leaped. "Is he at the new school site with the others? Come, I'll take you." Dos Rios had grown in the months of Sarah's absence. What had been a rough collection of adobes and ramshackle buildings now showed signs of real community, a mix of Mexican farmers, Anglo traders, freed slaves from Texas, and indigenous families who'd fled the reservation system. It was exactly the kind of place the territorial government pretended didn't exist, which made it perfect for their purposes. The school stood at the settlement's edge. Not really a school yet, just a large adobe structure with a half-finished roof. But children's voices carried from within, mixing English, Spanish, and dying in a cheerful babble that made Sarah's eyes sting with tears. Then she saw him. Ashkey stood on the roof, directing the placement of wooden beams, his shirt off in the spring warmth. He turned at the sound of approaching horses, and their eyes met across the distance. Without a word, he swung down from the roof and strode toward her, ignoring the knowing grins from the other workers. Sarah barely waited for Jose to help her from the wagon before she was in Ashkey's arms, breathing in the scent of sawdust and sage that meant home. "Nitsikis," he murmured against her hair. "You came back." "I promised I would." She pulled back to study his face, noting new lines around his eyes but the same steady warmth within them. "The judge ruled in our favor. Ashkey, Crawford's been removed, charged with embezzlement. The forced removal orders have been suspended pending federal investigation." "We heard." His hands framed her face. "Your newspaper friends made sure everyone heard. You're famous now. The white woman who went native to save Indian children." Sarah winced. The headlines were rather sensational, but if it helps protect the children, it does. And it brought unexpected allies. He gestured toward the building. "Come see what we've built while you fought with papers and laws." The inside of the school was chaos, but organized chaos. Children of all backgrounds worked together, some practicing letters on slate boards, others weaving traditional patterns, still others reading from a mix of books in multiple languages. Sarah recognized several faces from the mission school, including little Shimasani Yazi, who shrieked with delight and barreled into Sarah's arms. "Miss Sarah, you're back. Uncle said you would come when the snow melted." "And here I am." Sarah hugged the child tight, then looked around in wonder. "This is amazing. How did you manage it?" "Community effort," a new voice said. Sarah turned to find a black woman in a neat calico dress, her bearing suggesting education and authority. "I'm Elizabeth Freeman. I run the Freedmen's School in the morning, then help here in the afternoons. When we heard about your work at the mission, how you treated all children as worthy of real education." She extended her hand. "It seemed natural to join forces." Sarah shook her hand, marveling at the easy integration. "The authorities allowed this." "What authorities?" Elizabeth's smile was sly. "We're just a bunch of mixed-race nobodies in a settlement that doesn't officially exist, teaching our children to read and write and figure. Nothing threatening about that." Over the following days, Sarah threw herself into the work of building their unofficial school. By morning, she taught alongside Elizabeth and a Mexican woman named Doña Rosa. Afternoons were spent with Ashkey's grandmother and the other elders, ensuring traditional knowledge wasn't lost in the rush to provide Western education. Evenings found her writing letters to supporters back east, articles for sympathetic newspapers, grant proposals to private foundations who might fund their work without government strings. "You're trying to do too much," Ashkey warned one night, finding her asleep over her correspondence. "The bridge doesn't have to be built in a day." "But the children grow every day," Sarah protested, letting him lead her to their small adobe house at the settlement's edge.
Every moment we delay is another chance for them to be taken. Another. He silenced her with a kiss. You saved them. Sarah, the immediate danger is past. Now we build for the future, steady and strong. Their life together was nothing like what Sarah had once imagined her future would hold. No fine house with servants, no place in proper society. Instead, she had a 2-room adobe with chickens in the yard, students who called her Maestra Sarah, and a partner who treated her as an equal in all things. She wore bright skirts now, her hair often loose or braided in the practical style Windwoman had taught her. The turquoise comb was displayed proudly, no longer hidden. But happiness, Sarah learned, was still fragile in the borderlands. The trouble started with a letter from her Aunt Constance in Boston. Sarah's mother had died. A shock, though they'd been estranged since Sarah's marriage to Thomas. But the real blow came in the legal documents that followed. Her mother's will left a substantial inheritance, but with conditions Sarah must return east, renounce her unfortunate associations, and resume her place in proper society. $20,000, Sarah said numbly, staring at the figures. Do you know what that could mean for the school? We could build proper classrooms, bring in more teachers, buy books and supplies. Ashki sat beside her, expression carefully neutral. And the conditions? Renounce my associations. That means you, us, this life. She crushed the paper in her fist. How could she be so cruel, even in death? She was trying to save you, in her way. His voice held no bitterness. To bring you back to the world she understood. Well, I won't do it. We'll find another way to fund the school. Sarah. He took her hands, smoothing the crumpled paper. Think what you're refusing. Not just money, but security. A chance to fight from inside their world again, with resources and respectability. Without you. I've lived without you before. I could again, if it meant... No. The word came out fierce and final. Don't you dare be noble about this. We're partners. Ashki. In everything, I won't betray that for any amount of money. But the letter had started other wheels turning. Within a month, a territorial official arrived to inspect their irregular educational arrangement. Within 2, they received notice that teaching without proper certification was illegal. By summer, pressure was mounting from multiple directions. Someone's orchestrating this, Elizabeth observed after yet another official visit. These men don't just randomly appear in forgotten settlements. Sarah suspected who Crawford might be gone, but his allies remained, and her mother's will had reminded them that Sarah Whitman still existed, still defied their neat categories. The crisis came to a head at the summer gathering, when all the families came together to celebrate the corn harvest. Sarah was helping prepare feast foods when riders appeared on the horizon. Not officials this time, but rougher men, hired guns. Sarah Whitman, the leader called out, "We've got paper says you're to come with us. Legal matter back east needs settling." What legal matter? Ashki stepped forward, hand near his knife. None of your business. Breed. The man spit tobacco juice. The lady comes willing, or we take her. Choice is hers. Sarah felt the crowd tense around her. These weren't federal marshals who might be reasoned with. These were the kind of men who made problems disappear in the desert. I'll come, she said quietly. But I need time to gather my things. Sarah, no. Ashki's voice was low, urgent. Trust me. She squeezed his hand, then addressed the leader. 1 hour. You can water your horses while you wait. The man considered, then nodded. 1 hour, then we ride. Sarah walked calmly to their house, Ashki close behind. Once inside, she pulled him to the back window. The old escape route, the one we planned, take it now. I'm not leaving you. You're not. You're circling ahead. She pressed her mother's pearl-handled pistol into his hands, one of the few things she'd kept from her old life. Remember the Ghost Wells, the place where the lion saved us. They'll have to take that route going east. Be there first.
Understanding dawned in his eyes. With help. All the help you can gather. These aren't lawmen. Ashki, they're killers dressed in legal pretense. She kissed him hard. Go, now. He went, and Sarah spent the hour packing with deliberate slowness, changing into her most impractical Eastern dress, the kind that would slow travel and mark her as valuable goods not to be damaged. When she emerged, she looked every inch the proper lady, which made the hired guns relax their guard. Satisfied you're properly dressed? She asked with icy politeness. Shall we proceed? They rode east, Sarah side-saddle and awkward, complaining about the heat, the dust, the pace, anything to slow them down. By the time they reached the ghost wells, the sun was setting and the men were irritated with her delicate constitution. Water the horses, the leader ordered. We'll camp here tonight. Camp? Sarah's voice pitched high with distress. Surely you don't expect a lady to sleep outdoors with strange men. You gave up being a lady when you took up with savages. Another man leered. But don't worry. We're paid to deliver you breathing. Mostly. They were still laughing when the first arrow took the leader through the shoulder. He screamed, falling from his horse as more arrows whispered from the rocks. Not killing shots, disabling ones. Designed to terrify and scatter. The hired guns fired wildly into the gathering darkness, but their attackers were shadows, ghosts, desert warriors who knew every rock and crevice. Within minutes, it was over. The surviving men fled on foot, leaving horses and supplies behind. Sarah stood calmly in the chaos, smoothing her dusty skirts. Really, gentlemen? All this fuss? Ashki emerged from the rocks, bow in hand, followed by Jose, Wind Woman's husband, and a dozen other fighters from the settlement. Are you hurt? Only my dignity. This corset is murder after months of freedom. She looked at the wounded leader, who lay groaning on the ground. Though I believe this gentleman needs medical attention, perhaps he'll be more talkative about who hired him once we've tended his shoulder. They made camp at the wells, and as Elizabeth, who'd insisted on coming as field medic, worked on the wounded man, the truth emerged. A consortium of Eastern interests, led by Sarah's own cousins, had decided to claim her inheritance by having her declared mentally incompetent. Her degradation among the Indians would be proof enough, once she was safely locked away in an asylum. Charming family I have, Sarah said dryly, though I suppose I should be flattered they went to such expense. This won't end here, Ashki warned. They'll send more men, real lawmen next time. Then we make it end. Sarah's smile was sharp as flint. Elizabeth, how's your legal penmanship? They worked through the night, crafting documents that would stand up in any court. Bill of sale for Sarah's inheritance share to the Dos Rios Community School, predated and properly witnessed. Marriage certificate between Sarah Whitman and Ashki Nezaa, blessed by both Navajo tradition and a sympathetic Mexican priest. Legal adoption papers for 3 orphaned children from the settlement. There, Sarah said as dawn broke. Let them try to claim an incompetent woman could execute such complex legal arrangements. Let them challenge a marriage recognized by territorial law. Let them explain why a madwoman's money is good enough to steal, but not good enough to donate. They sent the wounded leader back east with the papers and a message Sarah Whitman was beyond their reach, protected by law, community, and the desert itself. Any further attempts would be met with federal investigation into their criminal conspiracy. You realize what you've done? Ashki asked as they watched the man ride away. There's no going back now. No chance to reclaim your old world. Good. Sarah leaned into his embrace. That world never wanted me anyway. Just the idea of me, proper, silent, obedient. This world takes me as I am. Wild, stubborn, impossibly brave. Exactly. The school thrived with its new funding. They built proper classrooms, brought in more teachers, created a model that other mixed communities began to copy. Sarah's articles about their educational experiment drew national attention. Not all of it positive, but enough to protect them from official interference. and in the high desert of Dos Rios, where boundaries blurred and bridges were built daily. Sarah finally found what she'd never known she was looking for, not just love or purpose, but a place where all the pieces of herself fit together. Teacher and student, white and Indian, proper lady and desert warrior, all united in the person she'd become. "No regrets?" Ashki asked one evening as they watched their adopted children play with others in the plaza. "Only one," Sarah admitted, "that it took me so long to find my way here." He pulled her close as the sun painted the mountains gold. Some bridges take time to build, but the strongest ones last forever. And theirs did, built of love and struggle, loss and hope. Two worlds joined in defiance of those who would keep them apart. In the end, that was legacy enough proof that bridges could stand against any storm, as long as the builders had courage enough to keep building. 40 years had passed since that first meeting by Cedar Creek, and Sarah's hair had gone silver as moonlight on water. She sat on the familiar flat rock beside the stream, her weathered hands still steady as she wrote in her journal. The morning sun caught the turquoise in her comb. Still bright after all these years. "You'll catch cold, sitting there so early." Ashki's voice came from behind her, warm with the same gentle teasing that had marked their decades together. "Says the man who used to stand naked in this very stream," Sarah replied without looking up, smiling at the memory that had started everything. He settled beside her, moving more carefully now at 75, but still carrying himself with the dignity that had first caught her eye. "What are you writing today?" "The ending," Sarah said softly. "Or perhaps the beginning. It's hard to tell with stories that circle back on themselves." They sat in companionable silence, watching the water flow as it had for countless generations. Around them, the desert was coming alive with spring cactus flowers blooming impossible colors, birds calling to their mates, the eternal cycle of renewal that the desert knew better than any place on earth. "She'll be here soon," Ashki said, and Sarah nodded. Their daughter, Hope Nijoni, was bringing her own children to visit, as she did every spring, a professor now at the University of New Mexico, teaching both education and indigenous studies, living proof that bridges between worlds could create something entirely new. "Do you remember?" Sarah asked suddenly. "What you said that first night about the dead wanting us to live fully so we'd have stories to share?" "I remember everything about that night." His hand found hers, still a perfect fit after 4 decades. "Why?" "Because I've been thinking about stories, about what we leave behind." She gestured to the journal. "I've written it all down. The school, the fights, the victories and defeats. But I keep coming back to this place, this water, that moment when everything changed. When you couldn't turn your face away," he said, and they both laughed. "Shameless behavior for a proper widow," Sarah agreed. "Thank God for it." The sound of horses interrupted their reverie. Hope appeared on the trail, her own hair showing early silver, her children riding beside her, 3 beautiful souls who carried the legacy of both their grandparents' worlds. Sarah's heart lifted as it always did at the sight of them. Grandfather, the youngest, barely 8, slid from her pony and ran to them. "Mama said we could stay a whole month this time." "Then we'd better make the most of it," Sarah said, gathering the child close. "Your grandfather has new stories, and I have lessons planned." "Both," the girl said firmly. "I want both, always both." Ashki caught Sarah's eye over their granddaughter's head, and she saw her own thoughts reflected there. Always both. The heart of everything they'd built. As they walked back to the house, larger now, expanded over the years to accommodate the constant flow of visitors, students, and family, Hope fell into step beside her mother. "The publishers wrote again," Hope said carefully. "They're very interested in your journals. They think the story of the Dos Rios school could inspire other communities." "And expose us to scrutiny we've avoided for 40 years. Sarah replied,
Times are changing. Mama, not fast enough, but changing. Mixed schools aren't illegal anymore. Mixed marriages are recognized in more places. Your story. Hope paused, choosing her words. Your story could help people understand that it was never about choosing sides. It was about creating a new space where both could exist. Sarah considered this as they entered the courtyard where the old school building still stood, expanded now into a complex that served children from 100 miles around. Teachers of every background moved between the buildings, preparing for the day's lessons. The sound of languages mixing, English, Spanish, Dine, Apache, and others, created a music that still made her heart sing. "Your father and I will discuss it," she said finally. "But not today. Today is for family." The celebration that night was like so many others over the years, multiple generations gathering to share food, stories, and laughter. Sarah watched it all with the deep contentment of a life well lived. The children performed traditional dances and recited Shakespeare with equal enthusiasm. The adults debated politics and philosophy in multiple languages. And through it all, the spirit of connection that had defined Dos Rios from the beginning. "You did this," Ashki murmured in her ear as they watched their granddaughter teach the younger children a clapping game that mixed Navajo and English verses. "This whole world exists because you couldn't turn your face away." "We did this," Sarah corrected. "A bridge needs both shores. Remember?" Later, after the children were asleep and the adults had drifted to their own homes, Sarah and Ashki returned to the creek. The moon was full, turning the water to liquid silver, and the spring night was warm enough to sit outside without discomfort. "I've been thinking about your mother's letter," Ashki said unexpectedly. "The one that tried to call you back to your old world." Sarah raised an eyebrow. He rarely mentioned that painful time. "What about it?" She was wrong about the association being unfortunate, but she was right that you had a choice. He turned to face her fully. "Every day for 40 years, you've chosen this, chosen us, chosen to build instead of tear down. That's the real story, isn't it? Not the scandal or the romance or even the school. The choosing." "The choosing," Sarah repeated softly. "Yes." They sat quietly, listening to the creek's eternal conversation with the stones. Sarah thought about the journals Hope wanted her to publish, the story waiting to be told. Perhaps it was time, not for fame or vindication, but for the young women and men who stood at their own crossroads, wondering if they had the courage to choose love over convention, purpose over propriety. "I want to go back one more time," she said suddenly, "to the beginning place, past the Sleeping Bear Rocks." Ashki understood immediately. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. The hidden grove beyond the Sleeping Bear Rocks had changed little in 40 years. The ancient cottonwoods still formed their natural cathedral, and the light still filtered through the leaves like filtered gold. Sarah and Ashki moved more slowly now, but they found their old teaching spot, where so many lessons had been exchanged. "It's smaller than I remembered," Sarah said, looking around. "Or we're larger," Ashki suggested, "fuller with all the life we've held." They spent the afternoon there, not teaching or learning, but simply being. Sarah told him about her decision to publish the journals, and he shared his plans to record the old stories for their grandchildren. They talked about the friends they'd lost and the battles still to fight. But mostly, they sat in comfortable silence. Two souls who had found their match and never let go, as the sun began its descent toward the western cliffs, painting them gold as it had on that first lesson. Sarah pulled out her journal one last time. "Help me find the ending," she asked. "How do we close a story that's really about beginnings?" Ashki considered, then smiled. "The same way we started it, with truth." Sarah nodded and began to write. The creek still runs through Cedar Canyon, carrying the stories of all who have touched its waters. The Navajo warrior is no longer young, but he still moves through the world as if he belongs to it. The woman's hair has gone white, but she has never again turned her face away from what matters.
They built a school that became a community. They raised children who became bridges. They proved that love doesn't need permission, only courage. And when their time comes to join the ancestors, they will have stories to share, stories of a world where differences were celebrated, where children kept their names and their souls, where two people from opposite shores built something that could withstand any storm. The water knows these stories. The stones remember. And somewhere, perhaps, another woman stands at another creek, unable to turn away from the possibility of a different life. To her, we say choose courage, choose love, choose the harder path that leads to freedom. The bridge is always there for those brave enough to cross it. Sarah set down her pen and looked at Ashki. Is that true enough? Perfect, he said, and kissed her as the sun touched the canyon walls. They made their way back home as the stars emerged, no longer young, but still very much alive. Their daughter met them at the door, worry creasing her face. We were about to send out a search party, Hope scolded gently. We were saying goodbye to old friends, Sarah said, thinking of the grove and the memories it held. And hello to what comes next. That night, Sarah gave Hope the completed journals. For the world, if they want them, but mostly for anyone who needs to know that bridges can be built, even when everyone says they'll fall. The publication of Sarah's journals 2 years later caused the sensation Hope had predicted. But by then, Sarah was beyond caring about scandal. She had her family, her community, her purpose. She had the man who'd taught her to see the world through different eyes and the children who carried that vision forward. And she had the creek, always the creek, where it all began and where, in the end, she asked to have her ashes scattered when her time came. Ashki's too, when he followed her 3 months later, unable or unwilling to live in a world without his bridge builder. They scattered the ashes at sunset. The whole community turned out to honor the couple who'd shown them a different way. The water carried their essence downstream, past the mission that had become a museum, past the settlements that had grown into towns, all the way to the sea that connects all waters, all stories, all hearts that dare to love across difference. And still today, if you know where to look, you can find the place past the Sleeping Bear Rocks where love defeated fear, where bridges were built from understanding, where a woman couldn't turn her face away and change the world because of it. The creek remembers, the stones remain, and the story continues in every child who keeps their true name, every couple who chooses love over convention, every bridge built between worlds that were never meant to be separate. This is the legacy of Sarah and Ashki, proof that the strongest bridges are built not from stone or steel, but from the courage to see each other truly, to choose connection over division, to believe that love is always worth the risk. The water still flows, the bridges still stand, and somewhere, someone else is learning they don't have to turn away. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, courage, and the bridges we build between worlds. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this tale meant to you. If you enjoyed this journey through the Wild West, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories that explore the untold romances and forgotten heroes of the American frontier. Don't forget to like this video and hit the hype button to help more people discover these powerful stories of love that defied all odds. Until next time, keep building bridges and choosing courage.